The radio crackled with static over the Hindu Kush mountains, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Commander Zara Ghost Kassam adjusted her headset, watching the infrared signatures of 6 Navy SEALs moving through the valley below. Her F-18F Super Hornet hung suspended in the thin air at 28,000 feet, engines humming with barely contained power. The mission briefing had been simple: provide close air support for SEAL Team 6's extraction of a high-value target from a Taliban compound. What they hadn't mentioned was that the compound was crawling with more hostiles than intelligence had suggested. Overlord, this is Phantom 77 requesting immediate CAS, grid 274896, came the tense voice through her helmet speakers. The SEAL team leader's breathing was labored, punctuated by the distant crack of AK-47 fire. Zara's fingers danced across her targeting pod controls, bringing the scene into crystal clarity on her multifunction display. 6 figures huddled behind a crumbling stone wall while muzzle flashes erupted from 3 different directions. The math was simple and brutal. They were outnumbered 5 to 1. Phantom 77, this is Reaper 2-1, she responded, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I have eyes on your position. Marked multiple hostile positions, preparing for danger close. A pause, then. Reaper 2-1, we need immediate support, not a briefing. The dismissive tone wasn't new. Zara had heard it countless times over her 8-year career, that subtle shift in voice when ground forces realized their air support had come with a different chromosome configuration than they'd expected. She'd learned to let it slide off her like rain on a fighter's canopy. But tonight, 6 lives hung in the balance, and their prejudices were a luxury none of them could afford. Copy that, Phantom, she replied, already calculating wind speed, target distance, and collateral damage radius. Her targeting laser painted the first machine gun nest with invisible light. Guns, 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 30 Mike, 15 seconds. The GAU-22A cannon beneath her aircraft roared to life, sending 4-second bursts of 25 rounds downrange at 3,800 rounds per minute. Through her targeting pod, she watched the first hostile position disintegrate in a shower of concrete and dust. The surviving Taliban fighters scrambled for new cover, their disciplined ambush dissolving into chaos. Good hits, good hits. The excitement in the SEAL's voice was palpable. Reaper 2-1, you just saved our. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north, Zara interrupted, her eyes scanning the thermal display. 3 technical trucks mounted with heavy machine guns were racing down the mountain road, their drivers apparently unaware that death was circling overhead. Phantom 77, you've got company incoming, bearing 015, approximately 2 minutes out. The night was about to get much worse. Through the green glow of her night vision goggles, Zara could see the SEAL team's predicament with surgical clarity. They were pinned down in what tacticians called a kill box, an area where every angle of approach was covered by enemy fire. The stone wall that currently provided their only cover wouldn't stop the .50 caliber rounds mounted on those approaching trucks. In her cockpit, surrounded by the soft electronic hum of million-dollar avionics, she found herself thinking about her father's words from 20 years ago. The sky doesn't care what you are, Habibti. It only cares if you're good enough. Major Kassam had been a Jordanian Air Force pilot, one of the few who'd earned American respect during the Gulf War. He taught her to fly in a rusty Cessna 172 when she was 12, his weathered hands guiding hers on the yoke as they soared over the Jordanian desert. Flying is not about the machine, he'd said in his accented English. It's about becoming one with the space between earth and heaven. Now, suspended in that same space, Zara prepared to honor his memory. Her left hand moved to the armament panel, selecting a GBU-12 Paveway II laser-guided bomb. 500 pounds of high explosive and shaped metal, accurate to within 3 meters when properly delivered. She dropped hundreds of them in training, dozens in combat, but never with this much riding on precision. Phantom 77, I'm going to paint those vehicles. Keep your heads down and mark your position with IR strobes. Negative Reaper, danger close protocols require. I know the protocols. Her voice carried an edge now, sharp as the mountain air outside her canopy. The lead technical truck was accelerating, bouncing over the rocky terrain as its gunner swiveled his weapon toward the SEAL position. Math and physics converged in her mind. Wind speed, target velocity, laser designation, angle, time of flight. Trust me. The word trust hung in the radio silence like a prayer. Below, 6 green dots appeared on her thermal display as the SEALs activated their infrared markers. The lead truck was now 90 seconds away from firing position. Zara's thumb hovered over the weapon release button. Her breathing slowed, falling into the rhythm her father had taught her during those long afternoons over the Jordanian countryside. The universe narrowed to a point of light on her targeting display, where her laser met the front bumper of the speeding truck. Rifle, she announced, and pressed the button. The Paveway II dropped clean from her wing pylon, its fins unfolding as GPS and laser guidance took control. 12 seconds of flight time stretched like eternity. The explosion lit up the valley like a miniature sun, the shockwave rippling through the mountain air with authority. When the smoke cleared, twisted metal was scattered across a 100-meter radius. The other 2 trucks had stopped, their drivers apparently reconsidering their life choices. Through her headset, she heard something she'd never heard from a SEAL team before: complete, awed silence. Holy Mother of, the transmission cut off as the team leader caught himself. Reaper 2-1, that was surgical. Zara allowed herself a small smile in the privacy of her cockpit. 18 months of flight school, 4 years of combat missions over Afghanistan and Iraq, countless hours of weapons training, and still they acted surprised when she could do her job. But tonight, surprise was working in her favor. 2 vehicles remaining, she reported, already tracking the surviving trucks as they attempted to retreat up the mountain road. They're running scared, but they might circle back with reinforcements. Phantom 77, what's your status on the primary objective? Target secured, moving to extraction point Bravo, but we've got more problems. The SEAL's voice had gained a new note of respect, subtle but unmistakable. Drone surveillance picked up a convoy heading this way from the main road. Estimate 12 to 15 vehicles, possibly including armor. Zara's stomach dropped. Her fuel gauge showed 38% remaining, enough for maybe 20 more minutes on station. The nearest friendly airbase was 40 minutes away, and she was carrying only 2 bombs and 600 rounds of cannon ammunition. Simple arithmetic told her what she didn't want to acknowledge. She couldn't handle a convoy that size alone. Overlord, this is Reaper 2-1 requesting immediate backup, grid 274896. We're about to have a very bad night. The response came from the airborne warning and control system aircraft circling somewhere in the darkness above her. Reaper 2-1, negative on immediate backup. Closest asset is Reaper 2-3, 25 minutes out. 25 minutes. The convoy would reach the SEALs in 15. The weight of mathematics pressed down on her like the thin air outside her cockpit. 6 of America's finest warriors were about to face overwhelming odds in a valley where escape routes were limited and extraction impossible. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes, Habibti, the sky asks more of us than we think we can give. Zara's hand moved to her fuel management system, switching to maximum conservation mode. If she couldn't bring more firepower to the fight, she'd make what she had count for as long as physically possible. The alternative, watching those 6 green dots disappear from her screen, wasn't acceptable. Phantom 77, this is Reaper 2-1. You've got 15 minutes until that convoy reaches you. I'm staying on station. Reaper, your fuel is my problem, not yours. Move to extraction point Bravo and keep those IR strobes active. I'll buy you whatever time I can." As she banked her Super Hornet toward the approaching convoy, Zara thought about the photograph tucked into her helmet bag, her father in his flight suit, standing beside his F-16 Fighting Falcon at King Hussein Air Base. He'd written something on the back in Arabic that she'd memorized long before she could read it. "The brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all." Tonight, caution was a luxury she couldn't afford. The convoy materialized on her targeting display like a string of deadly pearls, vehicles spaced at tactical intervals as they wound up the mountain road. Leading the formation was something that made her blood run cold: the angular silhouette of a Russian-made BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicle, its 30mm cannon capable of turning her aluminum and steel fighter into confetti if she flew too low. Zara's tactical mind began processing options with computer-like efficiency. The convoy was following a predictable path up the narrow mountain road, which meant limited maneuverability but also natural choke points. The first switchback was carved into solid rock, with a steep drop-off on one side and an impassable cliff face on the other. If she could block the road there, she might bottle up the entire convoy long enough for the SEALs to reach their extraction point. Her remaining GBU-12 would have to count. "Overlord, this is Reaper 2-1, engaging enemy convoy at grid 275112. Convoy composition includes at least one armored vehicle, multiple technical trucks, estimated 40 to 60 hostiles." Copy, Reaper 2-1. Be advised, satellites show additional movement from surrounding villages. Recommend. "Overlord, with respect, I can see my fuel gauge from here." Zara's voice cut through the radio chatter with professional authority. "I'm going to need you to clear my airspace and let me work." She pushed her stick forward, beginning a shallow dive toward the convoy. The Super Hornet responded like a thoroughbred given its head, acceleration pressing her back into her ejection seat as they descended through 25,000 feet. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to the small human drama playing out below. At 15,000 feet, she pulled level and began her attack run. The targeting laser reached out across the darkness, invisible fingers of light searching for the perfect impact point. The lead BMP was approaching the switchback now, its commander probably feeling confident in his armor and firepower advantage. He was about to learn the difference between feeling safe and being safe. "Rifle," Zara announced, and released her final paveway II. The bomb fell away into the night, following its predetermined path with mechanical certainty. Through her targeting pod, she watched the convoy continue its advance, oblivious to the death descending from above. The explosion carved a crater 30 feet across and 20 feet deep in the mountainside, bringing down enough rock and debris to block the road completely. The BMP disappeared beneath 10,000 tons of granite and limestone, its crew never knowing what hit them. The vehicles behind it screeched to a halt, their drivers suddenly understanding that the night had turned against them. But Zara's satisfaction was short-lived. Her threat warning system erupted in angry beeps and flashing lights as multiple surface-to-air missile sites painted her aircraft with targeting radar. Someone down there had been expecting American air support. "Phantom 7-7, this is Reaper 2-1. The convoy is stopped, but they've got SAMs. I'm going defensive." Her stick went hard left as she threw the Super Hornet into a violent evasive maneuver, diving toward the valley floor while dispensing chaff and flares behind her like a metallic aurora. Two SA-18 missiles streaked past her canopy, their proximity close enough to rattle her teeth. The mountain walls seemed to rush toward her at impossible speed before she pulled up at the last second, using the terrain to mask her aircraft from the remaining missile sites. "Jesus Christ, Reaper," the SEAL team leader's voice was strained with disbelief. "Are you hit?" "Negative, but I've got multiple SAM sites and my fuel is getting critical." She checked her gauge, 21%. In a fighter aircraft, anything below 20% was considered emergency fuel, enough for one, maybe 2 more attack runs before she'd be forced to head home or risk falling out of the sky. Through her canopy, she could see muzzle flashes erupting from the stopped convoy as frustrated Taliban fighters fired their small arms uselessly into the night sky. They couldn't reach her at this altitude, but they'd boxed her into an impossible situation. Every time she descended to attack, the SAMs would force her back up, burning precious fuel in defensive maneuvers. The radio crackled again. "Reaper 2-1, this is Phantom 7-7 actual." A different voice this time, older and carrying the unmistakable authority of command. "I need you to know, we heard your call sign wrong earlier. What did you say it was?" For a moment, Zara's finger hesitated over the transmit button. Her call sign wasn't something she advertised, wasn't something she wore like a badge of honor. It was a memory, a promise, and sometimes a burden. But tonight, with 6 lives hanging in the balance and her fuel gauge dropping toward the red line, maybe it was time to let them know exactly who was watching over them from the darkness above. "Phantom 7-7, my call sign is Ghost." The words carried across the radio waves with quiet finality, and that's not because I'm hard to see. The silence that followed stretched for exactly 7 seconds. She counted them on her chronometer. Then, from the SEAL team leader, "Ghost," as in Major Qasim, the ghost of Baghdad. Her father would have been proud of the name, though he never lived to hear it. She'd earned the call sign during her second deployment, when she'd spent 3 days flying solo missions over Baghdad during the insurgency's darkest period. 72 hours of continuous air support for ground forces, catching micro-sleeps between sorties while her ground crew performed miracles to keep her aircraft operational. By the end of those 3 days, enemy fighters had started calling her the ghost that never leaves, a spirit that haunted their every movement from the sky above. But the name meant more than endurance. It meant precision under pressure, loyalty beyond question, and the kind of courage that didn't announce itself with fanfare. The SEALs below had heard stories, whispered in ready rooms and briefing tents across 3 combat theaters. Now they knew who was flying cover for their mission. "That's a firm Phantom 7-7. Zara's voice carried across the radio with new weight, "and I don't leave people behind." The convoy below had started moving again, drivers abandoning their blocked vehicles and continuing on foot through the rocky terrain. Without the road to channel them, they could approach the SEAL position from multiple angles, turning a manageable tactical situation into a nightmare. Zara's threat warning system continued its electronic protests as the SAM sites tracked her movement, waiting for her to descend into their engagement envelope. She made her decision with the cold clarity that had earned her call sign. "Phantom 7-7, I'm going down there." "Ghost, negative. Those SAMs will light you up the moment you drop below 10,000. Then you better be ready to move when they do." Zara pushed her throttles to military power and rolled inverted, beginning a near-vertical dive toward the valley floor. 60 seconds to extraction point Bravo. Don't waste them. The Super Hornet plummeted through the night sky like a falling star, its twin F-414 engines screaming in protest as she pushed the aircraft beyond its recommended dive angle. 9,000 feet, 8,000, 7,000. Her radar warning receiver erupted in a symphony of electronic threats as every SAM site in the valley locked onto her aircraft simultaneously. At 5,000 feet, she pulled the trigger. Her GAU-22 cannon spoke with authority, sending a river of depleted uranium rounds into the scattered convoy personnel below. The targeting computer tracked and engaged multiple targets in rapid succession, the aircraft's nose dipping and weaving as she followed the cannon's guidance cues. Men scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their organized advance collapsing into individual survival instincts. At 3,000 feet, the first SA-18 missile left its launcher with a trail of white fire. Zara yanked her stick back and to the right, pulling nearly 9 gs as she hauled the Super Hornet out of its dive. The missile passed so close to her starboard wing that she could see its guidance fins through her peripheral vision. Her aircraft groaned under the stress, metal fatigue announcing itself through vibrations in the airframe. Phantom 77, you are clear to extraction point Bravo. Move, move, move. Through her targeting pod, she watched six figures sprint across open ground toward a small clearing where their helicopter waited. The Taliban fighters who'd survived her gun run were regrouping, but slowly, their coordination shattered by the sudden reversal of fortune. A second missile streaked past her canopy, close enough to trigger her aircraft's proximity alarms. Zara dove again, using the mountainous terrain to break the missile's lock, her wings slicing through air so thin it barely provided enough lift to keep her aloft. Her fuel gauge now read 17%, well into the emergency zone. Ghost, we're at the LZ. The SEAL team leader's voice crackled with static and relief. 30 seconds to wheels up. But 30 seconds might as well have been 30 minutes. As Zara climbed back toward safer altitude, her radar painted a new threat. 4 more vehicles approaching from the east, moving fast along a secondary road she hadn't noticed before. They'd reached the landing zone just as the extraction helicopter became airborne, a perfect moment of vulnerability that would turn a successful mission into a massacre. The radio burst to life. All stations, this is Warbird 11, inbound to your location with a full combat load. Reaper 23, her backup, finally arriving on station. But even as relief flooded through her, Zara's tactical mind was already calculating the geometry of the situation. The approaching vehicles would have visual contact with the helicopter in 90 seconds. Even with 2 aircraft now in the fight, there wasn't enough time to coordinate a proper attack before the SEALs became sitting ducks. Unless... Warbird 11, this is Ghost. I need you to take high cover and watch for more SAMs. I'm going low and fast. Ghost, your fuel state is my concern. Just keep those missile sights honest. She pushed her nose down again, this time aiming for the deck, military aviation parlance for flying as low as physically possible. At 500 feet above ground level, she was below the effective engagement envelope of most surface-to-air missiles, but well within range of every rifle and machine gun in the valley. It was a calculated trade. Missiles for bullets, technology for courage. The 4 vehicles came into view through her heads-up display, spread out in tactical formation as they raced toward the extraction site. Through the green filter of night vision, she could see armed men in the truck beds, weapons ready, faces set with the grim determination of fighters who knew they were moments away from engaging American Special Operations Forces. They hadn't counted on the Ghost. Zara's cannon erupted in a sustained burst, walking explosive rounds across the lead vehicle like deadly raindrops. The truck disintegrated in a ball of flame and shrapnel, its momentum carrying the burning wreckage into a boulder field where it rolled 3 times before coming to rest as twisted metal. The second vehicle swerved hard left, its driver panic steering away from the line of destruction. But Zara had anticipated the maneuver, leading her target the way her father had taught her to lead clay pigeons during their weekend hunting trips in the Jordanian countryside. Her next burst caught the truck broadside, the depleted uranium rounds punching through the engine block like paper. Small arms fire erupted from the remaining vehicles, tracer rounds creating deadly light shows as they searched for her aircraft in the darkness. Several bullets spanged off her wing surfaces, and she felt the aircraft shudder as one round found something important in her port engine bay. Warning, port engine oil pressure decreasing, announced her aircraft's synthesized voice with mechanical calm. Recommend immediate landing. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her Super Hornet was politely suggesting that she park her $50 million fighter aircraft in the middle of a Taliban-controlled valley in Afghanistan. The computer had many virtues, but tactical awareness wasn't among them. Phantom 77, status report, she called while lining up on the third vehicle. Wheels up in 10 seconds. Ghost, you beautiful crazy. The transmission dissolved into static as another burst of machine gun fire erupted from below. Zara's port engine warning lights were now painting her cockpit in angry red hues, and she could feel a subtle vibration in the airframe that suggested something expensive was coming apart at 300 knots. But the helicopter was climbing away from the landing zone, its rotors beating the thin mountain air as it gained altitude with precious cargo. 6 American warriors were going home tonight, and that was worth any price her aircraft, or she might pay. All stations, this is Phantom 77 Actual. The SEAL commander's voice carried a gravity that made everyone on the radio frequency listen. Mission accomplished. Package secured and en route to base. To the pilot flying cover, Ghost, I don't know how you threaded that needle, but you just saved 6 American lives tonight. Through her canopy, Zara watched the lights of the extraction helicopter disappear into the star-filled darkness, carrying her father's legacy along with the men she'd protected. Her left engine was still running, though the oil pressure continued to drop toward dangerous levels. The mathematics of fuel consumption, engine reliability, and distance to base created an equation with no comfortable solutions. But as she began her climb toward home, Zara found herself smiling despite the circumstances. Tonight, the sky had asked everything of her, and she'd answered with interest. Her radio crackled one final time. Ghost, this is Warbird 1-1. That was some flying down there. Mind if I ask, where'd you learn to shoot like that? Zara looked up through her canopy at the ancient stars, the same stars that had watched over Jordanian deserts and Afghan mountains, over her father's first solo flight and her own. Family tradition, she replied, and turned her wounded bird toward home. The flight back to Bagram Airfield took 37 minutes on 1.5 engines, with her fuel gauge reading 0 for the final 12 minutes. The Super Hornet's backup fuel pumps worked overtime to squeeze every last drop of JP8 from her tanks, while Zara nursed the throttles like a pianist playing a delicate sonata. She touched down on runway 3 with the grace of a ballet dancer, her main gear kissing the asphalt just as her starboard engine flamed out from fuel starvation. Ground control had cleared the runway and positioned crash trucks at intervals, their crews watching nervously as she rolled to a stop using only wheel brakes and aerodynamic drag. When the canopy opened and she climbed down onto the tarmac, the first thing Zara noticed was the small crowd that had gathered. Maintenance crews, armament specialists, intelligence officers, and a handful of pilots from her squadron, all standing in the pre-dawn darkness, watching her with expressions she'd never seen before. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, her crew chief, approached with his characteristic gruff demeanor softened by something that might have been pride. "Ma'am, I've been turning wrenches on fighters for 23 years, and I've never seen anyone bring home a bird that shot up on fumes alone." He gestured toward her aircraft, where multiple bullet holes stitched a pattern across the wing surfaces and fuselage. The port engine nacelle was streaked with oil, and several access panels had been ventilated by Taliban marksmanship. By any reasonable measure, the aircraft should have either crashed or been forced to eject over enemy territory. "Just good engineering, Chief," Zara replied, though her legs felt unsteady as the adrenaline finally began to ebb from her system. "And maybe a little luck." "Maybe." Rodriguez's weather-beaten face cracked into something resembling a smile. "But I heard the radio chatter, ma'am. What you did out there tonight, that wasn't luck. That was pure skill wrapped in brass." As the crowd began to disperse, heading back to their duties in the eternal rhythm of a combat airbase, Zara found herself alone on the flight line with her damaged aircraft. The Super Hornet looked smaller now, somehow, its battle damage visible in the harsh glare of the floodlights. Bullet holes and oil stains told the story of their shared ordeal, a narrative written in metal and hydraulic fluid. She pulled the photograph from her helmet bag and looked at her father's face in the dim light. Major Kassem had flown 73 combat missions during his career, earning the respect of allies and enemies alike through precision, courage, and an unwavering commitment to bringing everyone home. Tonight, she'd added one more mission to the family ledger. The satellite phone in her flight suit buzzed with an encrypted message from Squadron Command. Outstanding mission performance. Recommend immediate award consideration. All packages extracted safely, 0 friendly casualties. Personal message from SEAL Team 6 Commander follows. Ghost, we owe you 6 beers and our lives. The next time someone questions whether a pilot's got what it takes, they'll be hearing about tonight. Hooyah. Zara smiled and tucked the phone away. In a few hours, the sun would rise over the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and crimson. Her squadron would fly new missions, protect new ground teams, face new challenges in the endless cycle of air support operations. But tonight belonged to 6 Americans who were heading home because a ghost had watched over them from the darkness above. As she walked toward the squadron building, her flight boots clicking on the tarmac in rhythm with her heartbeat, Zara thought about the young girl who'd once dreamed of flying while sitting in the co-pilot seat of a weathered Cessna over the Jordanian desert. That girl had wanted to touch the sky. The woman walking across this Afghan airbase had learned to command it. Inside the squadron-ready room, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torch Williams looked up from his mission planning materials as she entered. Williams was old-school Navy, a former Blue Angels pilot who'd been flying combat missions since before Zara had finished high school. His opinion carried weight throughout the squadron, and his approval was notoriously difficult to earn. "Ghost," he said simply, standing and extending his hand. "That was some of the finest stick-and-rudder work I've seen in 20 years of naval aviation." Coming from Williams, the compliment was worth more than any medal or commendation. Other pilots in the ready room looked up from their charts and coffee cups, nodding acknowledgement with the understated respect that characterized fighter pilots' professional relationships. "Just doing the job, Torch." But even as she said it, Zara knew tonight had been more than just another mission. Something had shifted in the way her squadron mates looked at her, a subtle change in the dynamics that had governed her military career since flight school. For 8 years, she'd been the female pilot in a male-dominated profession, forced to prove herself repeatedly while fighting the assumption that she was somehow less capable than her male counterparts. Tonight, that assumption had died in a valley in Afghanistan, buried under the wreckage of a Taliban convoy and the successful extraction of 6 American warriors. Williams handed her a cup of coffee, the squadron's traditional post-mission ritual. Words already spreading through special operations channels. The SEALs are telling everyone about the pilot who took on a convoy single-handed and won. "It wasn't single-handed," Zara corrected, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Warbird 2-3 provided high cover and you did the heavy lifting on one engine and emergency fuel." Williams's voice carried the finality of professional judgment. "Own it, Ghost. Tonight you joined a very small club." As dawn broke over Bagram Airfield, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Zara stood at the ready room's large windows and watched the morning shift begin their preparations. Ground crews swarmed over aircraft, armament specialists loaded missiles and bombs, and pilots studied intelligence reports and weather forecasts for the day's missions. The war would continue, as it had for decades in this ancient land where empires came to test their resolve against the mountains and the people who called them home. But for this moment, in this place, 6 families in America would receive phone calls telling them their loved ones were safe. 6 mothers and fathers, wives and children, would sleep soundly knowing that someone they'd never met had been willing to risk everything to bring their warriors home. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Captain Sarah Chen, her commanding officer. "Debrief at 800. Media requests coming in. Apparently someone recorded radio chatter and it's going viral on military social media. Prepare for attention." Zara sighed and finished her coffee. Fame had never been her objective. She'd chosen military aviation for the same reason her father had, because the sky called to something deep in her soul, and because someone had to stand guard in the darkness above. But if attention was the price of proving that competence had no gender, then she'd pay it gladly. As she headed toward her quarters for a few hours of sleep before the debrief, Zara passed the maintenance hangar where Chief Rodriguez and his crew were already assessing the damage to her aircraft. The Super Hornet would need extensive repairs: new engine, patched wing surfaces, replaced hydraulic lines. But she'd fly again, ready to answer the next call from the darkness below. Because that's what ghosts do. They watch, they protect, and when the moment demands it, they descend from the heavens with the fury of angels and the precision of mathematics, reminding everyone that the most dangerous enemies are the ones you never see coming. The story of that night would spread through military channels like wildfire, growing with each retelling until it became legend. But at its heart, it would always be a simple tale. When 6 American warriors needed someone to watch over them in a valley full of enemies, a ghost in the sky had answered their call. And in the tradition of the finest military aviators, she'd stayed on station until the job was done. 3 weeks later, Zara stood at attention in the Pentagon's E-ring, facing a panel of senior officers that included her commanding officer, a Navy Cross recipient, and 2 admirals whose chest candy could have stocked a jewelry store. The formal citation reading had taken 15 minutes, detailing her actions with the dry precision of military bureaucracy. But the silver star hanging around her neck felt heavier than its actual weight in metal and ribbon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Richardson announced to the small gathering of press and Pentagon officials, "Lieutenant Commander Kassem represents the finest traditions of naval aviation. Her actions on the night of February 15th demonstrated courage, skill, and devotion to duty that reflect the highest credit upon herself, her squadron, and the United States Navy." The applause was polite and brief, as protocol demanded. But Zara's attention had drifted to the small section of invited guests, where Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez sat beside the 6 Navy SEALs whose lives she'd saved that night. They wore their dress blues with the casual confidence of men who'd earned every ribbon and device through blood and sweat, and when they stood to applaud, something in their bearing spoke of respect that couldn't be manufactured or awarded. After the ceremony, as the official photographs were taken and the standard interviews conducted, Petty Officer First Class Davidson, Phantom 77's team leader, approached her with the measured steps of a man choosing his words carefully. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice carrying the weight of honesty. "That night when you first came up on comms, I heard a woman's voice and I made assumptions." Zara studied his face, seeing not arrogance but the kind of hard-earned humility that came from having your prejudices corrected by reality. "What changed your mind?" "When you went after that convoy on one engine." Davidson's eyes held the 1,000-yard stare common to men who'd seen too much war. "I've worked with a lot of pilots, ma'am. Combat air support, close air support, search and rescue. But I've never seen anyone thread the needle like that, especially not with SAMs lighting up the sky and fuel running out." He paused, his hands clasped behind his back in a stance that was pure military bearing. "The thing is, we train with the assumption that air support means safety. Pilots drop their ordnance and head home to their clean sheets and hot meals. But you," he shook his head slightly, "you stayed, even when staying meant maybe not making it home." "That's the job," Zara replied, though she understood what he was really saying. "No, ma'am, respectfully, that's not the job. That's calling. And after 8 years of thinking I knew what courage looked like, I learned something new that night." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the Pentagon's main entrance. A news crew was interviewing Admiral Richardson about the role of women in combat aviation, their questions carrying the subtle skepticism that had followed female military pilots since the combat exclusion policy had been lifted. Admiral, critics continue to question whether women have the physical and psychological capabilities for frontline combat roles. How do you respond to those concerns? Richardson's answer was immediate and definitive. I respond by pointing to Lieutenant Commander Kassem's Silver Star citation. When 6 of our finest warriors needed someone to watch their backs in enemy territory, a female pilot risked everything to bring them home. The enemy didn't care about her gender, neither did the laws of physics, and neither do I. But it was Davidson who provided the final word, stepping forward with the confident authority of a combat veteran. Sir, if I may, Lieutenant Commander Kassem didn't prove that women can fly combat missions. We already knew that. What she proved is that when the chips are down and your life's on the line, you don't want someone watching your six because of what they are. You want them there because of who